It can be a dark world sometimes. Don't be afraid to be a source of light. It can be a dark world sometimes. But don't be afraid to be a source of light.
Peace, good people. Thank you all for coming into another episode of Soul Affirmations with Felicia and Karega.
With Karega and Felicia.
Yes, we are grateful that you're building this space with us.
Yeah.
Fee, I really love building this space with you. I love the story. I love the reference. And I really love the idea that we are creating pathways for all of us to love more abundantly.
Yes. I love the processing. I love the refinement. I love the love that we get to talk about and investigate. And this episode will be no different. We ended our last one investigating what's occupying love's territory, but also defining what is love's territory, which is our being, right? And I want you to turn to your neighbor, tell them to pull out their Soul Affirmations text and turn to page 6. Tap them with consent.
Neighbor.
Let them know.
Now, neighbor.
And it reads, I am not bigger than love. Love is not bigger than me. In love I live, and love lives in me. I am love.
In love I live, and love lives in me. I am love.
I am love. This is such a beautiful way to see ourselves. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we talked briefly about the light in the last episode and how circumstances can work to dim it. And those same circumstances, adverse, can impact how we even see ourselves and see ourselves as being love.
Yeah. But then as you talk about that light, though, we know that we believe, but we know that love is the vehicle by which light transfers. Right. So if we are able to create new perspectives for our loved ones by showing up in love so they can see more of the situation, more of the circumstance, more of themselves. Right. The work I really want to dedicate is helping create visibility for folks to be seen, for folks to see themselves differently so we can see one another differently. I will, in fact, see someone differently if I'm able to see myself wholly. Right? But the lens I'll use to assess someone else or see someone else can be informed if I don't see myself totally. Right. And that can impact the way I see the world around me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this visibility, this connected work, right? Love it connects us.
Yeah.
It says, I am not bigger than love. Love is not bigger than me. Right. In love I live, and love lives in me. Love lives in me. I am love. So in this exercise, in this affirmation, we are seeing that love is being described as something not separate of you. Right? So when it's not separate of you, that means it's in you. We are just trying to create more room for love to have room, but it's already there. And if it's already there, that means we are deserving of it. We're deserving to give it to ourselves and deserving to give it to our neighbors. But it's so challenging sometimes when I'm in proximity to neighbors who believe that someone is less deserving of love. Whether it's by their actions or whether it's by their presentation of self, we determine and make these evaluations on who's deserving of love or who's most loved. And to me, that's just a little antithetical to the full power of love. Like if we start becoming selective with who deserves love, it undermines the power of love. Right? Love is greater than that.
Man,
it's greater than some selective course on who gets it more because of the way they present or the way they don't present.
Man, the way it presents, the way it doesn't present, what does love look like? I've been asked this question before, but not in a generalizable way, more specific to how does your love look like with me? Like how do I experience love with you? And one of the ways that I could best describe it would be, well, one, I say it's revolutionary. It's a revolutionary love that sees in circumstance rather than in judgment.
Ooh, say that again.
Karega's love for me looks like seeing me in circumstance rather than judgment. He does not compare my differences to anything else. You know what? It is understanding that love, how we define it, right? Love's territory is my being. He sees me in my being.
When I asked you to say it again, I had to work so hard not to interrupt you because I didn't know you were talking about my love. I thought you were talking about love.
Well, so I think that is that.
Respect, but I just want to make it clear for the listeners that I wasn't trying to hear a compliment twice. I really enjoyed your perspective on love, and then I realized you were talking about me, and then suddenly, right, I got like on air nervous.
Oh,
right?
I'm sorry.
No, but it's okay. It's okay. I mean, this is open and transparent.
Yes.
I'm really particular about the way I show up for you in love.
Yes.
I've worked to learn how to do this better. I had to develop a pathway to you after asking for your hand in marriage, after marriage, after you said yes. There was still so much work for me to learn how to love you, because you were, in fact, growing and changing, right? And in a conversation we had on our Instagram live recently, we talked about intimacy through inquiry, right? And that process, I think, is so critically important. Now we're talking about intimacy particularly, so we'll talk about that facet of love. But to make it very clear, this practice of love also includes non-romantic relationships.
Yes.
And we believe that romance can definitely be increased by a healthy practice of love.
Yes.
But it isn't in fact that we're talking about romance when we're talking about love.
Exactly.
So I'll clarify that a little bit when we go forward. But talking specifically to this idea, developing in this intimacy through inquiry, whether we get to know ourselves intimately or we get to know our partners intimately, I wanted to get to know love intimately. So I inquired of love. Yeah. And in my music, you might even hear me inquire of love. In fact, I'm going to do y'all one better.
What you finna do?
My grandmother's 87.
Yes, she is.
I was at my mom's house working on some rhymes, and my grandmother comes over to me and pulls out her notebook. So first things first, y'all have to know that my grandmother is the first writer in the family. Okay. And she made it very clear that she was supporting her grandchildren in their education because she was not given the same opportunities to pursue her education growing up in Jamaica. But she was always a lifelong learner. And she has this notebook. And in one of the notebooks, she asked this profound question. I have a photo of it too. What does love require of me? Ooh. She asked this question, and I remember how I felt reading that she was inquiring of herself about love. And I said, this is some serious inside work. What does love require of me? Wow. Was a question she asked herself. That frames for me so much about this inquiry process. And that to truly become more versed at a thing, we should ask questions, right? Pose questions for ourselves, for our loved ones. But this inquiry for me taught me how to love you. It wasn't about me loving you according to the love that I thought you should have. It wasn't about me loving you according to what I thought love looked like. But this would be truly loving you to an extent that was fulfilling to you. Now, I'd been doing this, I would like to think all along our relationship and our marriage. But grief was this invitation for me to love to a depth that I hadn't known previously. A friend of ours shares that she wrote to us, right? Grief is the deepest love. Mm-hmm. And when I saw those words, it empowered me. I wasn't just a victim in my grief, but in fact, it was an invitation to a new dimension of love. And in this new dimension of love, I would do intentional work and deep work about silencing the pressures of the world, silencing the noise of the world, silencing the ways of the world, so that I can more intimately attend to you. Because to watch you carry our child for 41 weeks, to remember the groans of your labor, I can remember the lighting in the room. I can remember the scarf that I used to relieve pressure off your hips. I have all these memories. But I also knew that you would be requiring a love that I haven't seen in the world yet. What I believed was I was capable of being your partner in love through it all. That this would not break me or break us, but that I was capable of becoming one with love to become one with you. So grief grew me tremendously. And I'm grateful for the lessons that grief taught me about the practice of love, about that oneness with love. Mm-hmm. But what happened in the grief, I also started to understand that, yes, while I loved you this deeply, while you were deserving because of our loss, I couldn't segregate who and who did not deserve love. I was either going to love fully all of God's creations, or I was going to pose as if I knew who was deserving of love and who wasn't. The only person who would be shortchanged by that practice was me. If I am trying to choose who deserves love and who doesn't, it's interrupting my experience with love.
This is why I said it's revolutionary. This is some revolutionary love, man.
You just can't. You don't play with it. You don't try to manipulate it for your good, right? Mm-hmm. You don't try to manipulate it for your self-righteousness.
Or even, like you said, like just loving what is like us.
Oh yeah, or just loving what is like us. That notion to me is underdeveloped at truly what love is. If you only love what is like you, or you only love a likeness, to me it's a deficit of the full capacity of love, and that sounds more like nepotism. It sounds more like the easy way out, because love.
That's real easy.
Yeah, because the other half of love, right? When we talk about loving totally and with our fullness, then we talk about loving what challenges us.
Yeah.
Right. And not too many people like that conversation. Hell, I'll tell you right now, some days I don't like that conversation. Right? Because it's like loving what challenges me. I'm not there right now. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is, you don't have to be there right now. You just pursue it.
Yeah.
It's the practice of love.
Yeah.
That I'm so grateful to come here and do.
When you bring up loving what challenges us, I remember you saying that particular affirmation, what page is that on? I'm not going to read it, but just for reference, love as a philosophy is much easier than love as a practice. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's page 16. We talked about that, right? And I understand from reflecting on it and asking you, okay, why do we affirm this? That this particular affirmation comes from being challenged by your students, right? So you got these, and I brought up different examples. We've talked about it. I think, like I said, Karega's one of his first instances of having to love what challenges him is Dre Day on his desk on his very first day in the classroom, kicking off papers, punting the papers, and beating his chest and stomping his feet. But there have been other instances, right? And even when we were working at...
Not to cut you off, he was beating his feet, not stomping them.
I'm sorry. Thank you, baby.
DC.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You know, I didn't work in the DC public schools. But yeah, just being challenged by man, a child will challenge you. Child will challenge you, but are they not deserving of love?
Ooh, what a perfect example. And you could ask this to parents, right? You could ask, and we got plenty of examples.
Ooh, I can bring up a parent or two.
We got plenty of examples right now of parents being challenged by their children, right? But the idea is this. That's a very fine place to start, right? The way your children require of you to see beyond your preference, right? And to love them totally. And are they not deserving of love?
Are they not?
So the question then becomes, it's not whether they're deserving or not. I think we're finding a new essential question. Am I capable of loving through this challenge?
Ooh.
Right? Am I capable of showing the love that I want to through this type of challenge? Because the truth of the matter is that's really where the deficit starts, right?
Yeah.
I can't love you the way I need to right now. That you ever you ever had your parent need to take some time away from you? I don't want to laugh because I don't want to know what that's like. But I remember my mom would have to take time away from us. And now I'm thinking about it like, yo, that's scary, right?
And I think about our lovely sister, our Chanda.
Oh, yeah. Oh, listen, my baby sister is one of my favorite human beings in the world. Ooh. To know me is to know that. All right? You can't. That's my
still
girl forever.
He still wears a button.
I wear her preschool button. That was my G. First things first. That's why I first learned how to do a ponytail. Seriously, I had to learn to do my little sister hair so I could go play basketball. So shout out to Chanda. I love you so much.
Who has 3 incredible, amazing, beautiful, talented girls. I mean, they're phenomenal.
Wow. And when I think about that experience, wherever you are, Chanda, however you hear this, I just want to shout you out for loving those babies the way you do, your babies the way you do, day in, day out, when it's hard, when they challenge you, by yourself. I just have so much respect for how you love, for how you're growing in your love. And now I went from laughing to really understanding, like, oh, it's real.
It is real.
Our children, the children, my students, young people, usually people who are different than you. At some observable intersection, they will be different from you. But we know that difference doesn't mean deficit.
It doesn't.
Difference does not mean deficit. In fact, in the landscape of love, difference is often something that can help you love more effectively.
That is the connecting
more
point.
More deeply, when you can love across difference.
Yes.
You find out how expansive love is. When you can love across difference, you find out the power, the true power of love, that it can unite and cover and hold. And something I think makes sense, I want to make clear really quickly. Yes, I love Black people. Yes, I love to make room for Black people and Black life and Black children. Mm-hmm. Yes, I love being around us. I love our rhythm. I love our smiles. Mm-hmm. I think about the Black Joy Parade, right? And what that feels like in Oakland. Mm-hmm. And the love that I have for Black people is because I believe all people deserve that love, but the world still happens to act like they don't know how to love Black people. So I make it my duty to love in the margins first. Love for me looks like loving in the margins first. Mm. It looks like going to the least of us, the left out and the looked over first to make room for them. But it doesn't mean I love anyone else any less.
Right.
And to just be very clear, when you are love and love is in you, as the affirmation reads, it becomes such a hassle to live outside of love. It becomes a genuine expense to live outside of love, because you know it's a detour that you have to somehow make your way back to love, right? Mm-hmm. This is the challenge for me when I experience racism. This is the challenge for me when I experience media headlines that try to dissolve the role of racism and hate crimes.
Oh,
right?
Man.
Like, and I'm trying to keep this balance between speaking for what's true and guarding my peace.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good to have to keep pointing out when you know those who are on the side that isn't love. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel good to keep pointing out their behavior because we know they're doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the statement alone that exclusively says, stop Asian hate, for me, it under investigates the role of white supremacy.
Yes.
And I have a challenge with a simplistic statement like that absolves and dissolves the role of white supremacy in the hate crime. Mm-hmm. Right? So for me, though, I'm saying that when I feel myself feeling this way, I know it's a detour from the frequency of love that I really want to live in. I'm not afraid to confront those feelings. I just know that is not where I stay.
Yeah.
So each time I have an interaction with something that is not displaying love, such as white supremacy, damn, that's just exhausting. It's got to be, hey y'all, it's got to be exhausting to practice white supremacy. It's rooted in falsehoods. There's no science or accuracy to it. It's just got to be exhausting to live that way.
It's inferiority.
It's exhausting for me to think about the way you behave under white supremacy, much less have to live under that doctrine and philosophy. But here's what my challenge is when I experience that. I'm gonna make it very clear too. It's not about like, oh, how do I love the person who caused harm? No, it's how do I not let their behavior take me off a path of love? When I'm on this path of love, I can recognize that everybody is deserving of love. And I can also recognize that I am not fully capable of knowing how to love through this challenge yet. Mm-hmm. But it does not mean that I create a statement that says you're less deserving of love, because I know love is going to be the only thing that bring you to yourself to reconcile with your choice behavior and the harm you caused. A hardened heart won't do that. A prideful heart won't do that. Mm-hmm. It's going to require love to experience the empathy that helps one reconcile their own choices or their own guilt. I know what it's like for somebody to be full of pride after they caused harm. Right? I was in the courtroom looking at the man who took my brother's life, and I watched what presented like pride to me at the moment. To be honest, you know what else I had to think about? How many times my students couldn't apologize publicly. How many times they would choose pride over acknowledging their harm because they don't have the ability to form the words to take responsibility for their actions publicly. So they would choose a cool pose. They will choose this pride. They would choose this pride because it's, at this point, it's gotten them this far. Right? Why would I try something new now? My pride has gotten me to this very day that I'm in. Crash or burn. I've been rolling with my pride and I'm not willing to release it. So I know that the gunman who performed that hate crime in Georgia, I know that he's deserving of love. I understand that I'm not capable of loving in that capacity yet. But I know that love will be the only thing to strike the moral conscience of a hardened heart. It's the only thing that can penetrate a hardened heart. And when that love happens, empathy, connectedness, and you recognize the extent of your harmful behavior, right? I'm not talking about this is his path to reconciliation.
No,
I'm not talking about that. I'm saying specifically that in a society that hides and protects white supremacy and affords it the descriptor of just having a bad day, it will require something deeper, something bigger for his moral conscience to be called present. And the only thing I know that has that power is love. You can't beat someone and make them own their actions.
Nope.
That's not the way you get to a hardened heart. You can't get to a hardened heart by anything you do physically to that body.
Ooh, that's a hard one.
That's a real hard.
That's a hard one when you are on the end of it.
Receiving the harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're holding the rage.
Without a doubt.
That is some.
The thing that I can promise our listeners is that if you ever had the chance to act on your rage, it did not create the freedom you thought you were pursuing. You can take it from someone who has been there. Acting fully in the power of rage does not create the freedom that you thought you were pursuing. It's often quite the opposite. When you come down from the high of that rage, after you just caused the harm, and have to essentially make peace, make understanding with your behavior, it's just more work that takes you further away from the practice of love. So I really make it a duty to not let white supremacy take up my space or my day, especially on places called Black love. Okay. First and foremost. But the Black love isn't separate of love. It's the courage and the know-how to love Black people. Something the world keeps acting like they don't know how to do. So we come here to model how to do it first. But it's love that we're talking about. And all of us are deserving of it. All of us
in the Black experience. Because it is so multivariate, especially in America. And, white supremacy will try to group us and make us like one type of Black, right? This is Black, but no, that is not true. And
Black isn't monolith, but our freedom is. Right? But our freedom is, and that's the complexity of it all. That we are not all the same, but it will take these things irrefutably for all of us to be free.
Yes.
Right? And until we are free, we ain't free.
Man. And so in that reminder, difference does not mean deficit.
Oh, no. Difference does not mean deficit. It is, in order for us to live under the promise of love, I can tell us all, myself included, that we're going to have to learn how to love across more differences.
And to see ourselves in our circumstances rather than with judgment, rather than with comparison, compared to our psyche of processing, compared to the things that we've only seen, our limited experiences of what we've seen.
I need you to say the part about seeing ourselves in circumstance rather than judgment. I want you to say that again, because I want to tease out something that happens often.
Okay.
In our psyches.
Yeah. No, we have to, our love has to look like seeing ourselves in our circumstances, understanding that those circumstances inform our choice behaviors rather than seeing ourselves in comparison to one another or even with judgment. We do not all have the same lived experience, though we share the experience of being Black in America. And I don't know if this is correlated exactly, but I was reminded of a picture I had seen on Instagram. Somebody had posted a picture of these young Black boys. They had their shirts off. They're standing on the corner. They're sagging. Their J's is on. They're throwing up whatever it is that represents where they are currently residing in, their hood, their sector, that block. And I recall seeing all of these comments that said what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. And the comments are themed with judgment. The comments are themed with comparing them to whatever standard that they have afforded themselves by which they think Black people should ascribe to. The comments are flooded with a misunderstanding of where they're actually standing on that corner. And I remember just seeing it in having worked in the schools and being challenged by students and understanding that what those challenges feel like and when I'm comparing them to my lived experience, how I may perceive them, having to be mindful of that. I wrote like, no, I love these young, I love them. When I see them, I love them. And I love them because they're deserving of love. Nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters.
I believe there was a great poet who wrote "Nothing Even Matters." I believe that was the great D'Angelo, Lauryn Hill, the great poets.
The great poets.
But no, none of those things matter. When you talked about seeing us in circumstance and not judgment, it made me think about the word grace. And if we could introduce the word grace into the practice of love and patience, because sometimes seeing in circumstance might cause the brain to think about when you were in that circumstance. And then you weren't attempting to judge, but just that quickly the brain went into judgment because you compared it to when you were in that circumstance. And then you begin to list a path of what somebody needs to do to not be in that circumstance, right? But then it turns into judgment instead of love and compassion, right? I think that we can start to use statements like, look, I identify with you on these experiences. Mine may have been different, but this is where I identify with you.
Yeah.
Right? Start identifying with one another rather than telling folks that I was just like you, right? And here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Because just by virtue of time and space, the science, the irrefutable science of time and space, you are not, in fact, in their position. You are not, in fact, in their position.
Yeah, no, you're missing some variables. There are some variables missing. They're unknown that you cannot see.
There's unknown, but then there's also the irrefutable science of time and space.
Man.
And the path from gangbanging in 1996 may not look like it looks now.
Come on.
Right? The path of separating yourself from the folks who are pulling you down might not look the same now with all this virtual connectedness.
Yeah.
And how young folk could be struggling to separate themselves from those identities or those practices that aren't showing up for love for them. So all I'm asking is that we become a little bit more patient and our practice of grace extends as we start talking about love. I'm ready to pull up on a part of love, the conversation now. We had enough episodes where we start embedding some of the other values that helps us love more abundantly, because I can say with all sincerity at the end of every episode, so that we may love more abundantly. But I want to start laying some tools so that we can love more abundantly. So just so every listener out there knows that when you hear me talking about love, I am in fact talking about this embedded sustained grace and this embedded sustained patience. That's what helps us love more abundantly. So I want to get to the place where we start bringing those into the practice. Because without patience and grace, I'm telling you, the brain is going to accelerate into judgment and comparison.
Which is a natural thing the brain does.
Yeah, you're not wrong for doing it.
Hey, we're not judging you for doing it. Okay.
Listen, it's how we know a hot stove, right?
Yeah.
It's how we know like all these things we learned as data input sensory when we were younger. Touch it. Is it hot? Is it hot? Is it hot? And you realize what's too hot for you and what's hot enough for you and what you can hold.
Yeah.
So the brain is doing this comparison naturally all the time. And I'm just saying that natural tendency for the brain to compare interrupts our process to love more abundantly.
Yes. Yes. Man, I was going to say something from there, but I forgot my train of thought. I was going to wrap it right with it in terms of how processing happens. But I love what you are saying about bringing those other parts, other pieces of love, how that shows up for us.
Absolutely.
And I found an affirmation that I wanted to share with you. If you would touch your neighbor, remind them to grab their book. Touch them with consent.
I got consent.
No, you don't have consent. I'm just kidding. Turn to page 60 and you will find, be patient with yourself. It takes time and deep breathing to see the bigger picture. I'll say it again. Be patient with yourself. It takes time and deep breathing to see the bigger picture.
Oh, I took a deep breath just so I could see it more. Be patient with yourself. It takes time and deep breathing to see the bigger picture. If we are committed to knowing that it takes time, and deep breathing to see the bigger picture, if we're committed to knowing that, it equips us to have a latency on our judgment, or even a grace with ourselves on our judgment. It doesn't make you less of a human being if you are practicing judgment. It just decreases your ability to have empathy and to connect. But be mindful to yourself that if you are, let's just say, like, you have a tendency to judge, take that deep breath and remind yourself that I know that this makes sense, but this isn't the pathway to love, right? Love and judgment cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Love and judgment cannot occupy the same space at the same time. So you'll have to ask yourself, right, how do you make more room for that love? And I always laugh because there are ways to challenge this. I do it especially around food, right? It's like, do you love it? What do your taste buds say? Your taste buds are judging it, right? But we'll leave that for a later conversation. But I really just want to invite us to that practice of deep breathing and patience so we can see the bigger picture. You'll be surprised what we can learn when we are not weighed down by judgment. We love y'all. Massive love, abundant love. Yes. May we all love more abundantly. May we all love more abundantly. And if you are interested in continuing to refine and understand the practice of love and what it looks like with us, we ask that you come back, rate, review, follow. Get on board. Follow so you can not miss out on anything. I like the practice of folks who have been DMing us with their questions or their thoughts or feedback from a show. Yes, please do that. Please keep that up. I love being able to create an experience that includes your inquiry. We want to keep you connected. Thank you. Peace, good people. Peace.